It's Monday, the 8th of April. I'm Nell, and this is Newsround. There's only one big story this afternoon. Britain's first woman Prime Minister, Baroness Thatcher, has died. We'll bring you the reactions from around the world and look back at the life of one of the most important figures in recent times. Margaret Thatcher, Britain's first woman Prime Minister, died peacefully today at the age of 87. Lady Thatcher ran the country between 1979 and 1990, and the work she did changed the country enormously. We'll be looking back at the impact she had on the UK in a minute, but first, lots of tributes have been coming in since the news broke at lunchtime. The Prime Minister, David Cameron, had this to say.
Well, today is a truly sad day for our country. We've lost a great Prime Minister, a great leader, a great Britain. As our first woman Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher succeeded against all the odds. And the real thing about Margaret Thatcher is that she didn't just lead our country, she saved our country.
The BBC's political editor Nick Robinson summed up why history would remember Margaret Thatcher.
In an era in which politicians are so often greeted, frankly, with indifference, sometimes with contempt, Britain was once led by a woman, the woman who died today, who inspired passion. Now, that passion was sometimes love, it was sometimes loathing, but passion it certainly was.
So, what was it about Margaret Thatcher and her policies which made her such an incredibly important figure in modern British history? Well, I've been looking back at her time in office. 30-odd years ago, not many people thought a woman would ever run the country, including Margaret Thatcher herself.
I don't think that there will be a woman Prime Minister in my lifetime.
But in 1979, she made history by being elected Prime Minister, and over the next 11 years, she transformed Britain. Right from the start, Margaret Thatcher divided opinion. She wanted to make big changes to the way the country was run. She wanted private companies and people to run things instead of officials because she believed they'd be run better, and sold off things owned by the government like British Gas and BT. Her time as Prime Minister also saw thousands of ordinary people gaining more of a stake in society, being able to buy their own council houses. Her policies also helped make the City of London one of the most successful financial centres in the world. The PM became a hero to many when in 1982 she sent British troops to defend the Falklands. The tiny islands 8,000 miles away in the South Atlantic Sea had been invaded by Argentina. Although hundreds of lives were lost, the victory was celebrated on the streets back home. But though she had many supporters, some of the changes she introduced were very unpopular. In 1984, thousands of miners protested for a whole year against her plans to shut down lots of coal mines and cut lots of jobs. And in 1990, there was fighting on the streets of London because of a tax, the poll tax, that people thought hit the poor harder than the rich. Margaret Thatcher was thought to have survived on just 4 hours sleep a night and got the nickname the Iron Lady for being tough and sticking to her decisions.
The ladies not for turning.
After 11 years in power and 3 election victories, she'd been Prime Minister for longer than anyone else in the 20th century. But eventually, even her own party thought she had been in charge for too long, and she left Downing Street in tears. Now, more than 20 years on, she is recognised as a Prime Minister who transformed the face of Britain and will be remembered as one of the most important figures in modern British history. Well, tributes have been coming in from political leaders here and from around the world. The President of the United States, Barack Obama, said the world has lost one of the great champions of freedom and liberty, and America has lost a true friend. The former Prime Minister of the UK, Tony Blair, has said Margaret Thatcher was a towering political figure. Very few leaders get to change not only the political landscape of their country, but of the world. Margaret was such a leader. And the Mayor of London, Boris Johnson, has said her memory will live long after the world has forgotten the grey suits of today's politics. OK, let's now go live to London from where the BBC's political reporter Chris Mason joins us. Chris, why was Margaret Thatcher so important?
She was so important, and you get a sense of just how important she was, that all these years on, 20 years now, more than 20 years since she left Downing Street and stopped being Prime Minister, there are so many reflections at her death today. She changed our country hugely. Our country was unrecognisable back then to how it is now. For instance, she thought that it was time that people and businesses ran things like the gas supply and ran things like the telephones. They used to be run by the government. moment, and you get a sense from the reaction around the world, from President Obama in Washington, from our Prime Minister David Cameron here in the UK, and lots of other world leaders, as to just how important she is. There'll be lots of reflections to come, no doubt, in the coming days.
Thanks, Chris, from London. Thanks for that. OK, that is all for me for now. I'll be back for more reactions to the death of Baroness Margaret Thatcher just after 10 to 7. Make sure you see it then. Bye.